What do you do when the most feared man in the city offers you shelter? The storm tore through the streets like a living thing, furious and unforgiving. Rain didn't just fall, it attacked, hammering the pavement with a violence that matched the thunder rolling overhead. She huddled beneath the broken awning of an abandoned storefront, her entire body shaking so hard her teeth clattered together like broken glass. 8 days. That's how long she'd been on these streets. 8 days since the fire took everything: her apartment, her belongings, the few precious photographs of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else now. The insurance company said the building wasn't up to code. They weren't paying. The landlord disappeared. And just like that, she went from having a home to having nothing but the clothes on her back and a canvas bag with a broken zipper. The cold cut through her thin jacket like knives. She pulled her knees to her chest, trying to make herself smaller, trying to conserve what little warmth her body still produced. Her name was Irene, and she was 28 years old, and she was going to die here. She could feel it in her bones, in the way her fingers had stopped responding to her commands, in the fog creeping into her mind. Hypothermia, she thought distantly. This is what it feels like. Then she heard it. The purr of an expensive engine cutting through the storm. Headlights swept across the street, and a sleek black car pulled to a stop directly in front of her pathetic shelter. The engine cut. A door opened, and a man stepped out into the rain like he didn't even feel it. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than 3 months of her old rent. Dark hair, sharp features, and eyes that seemed to see everything, even in the darkness. He looked at her, and Irene felt something shift in the air between them. This wasn't a good Samaritan. This was something else entirely. Something dangerous. Get inside. His voice cut through the storm, deep and commanding, leaving no room for argument. Irene stared at him, her mind struggling to process what was happening. Every instinct screamed danger. You didn't get into cars with strange men. You didn't accept help from people who looked like they owned the night. But her body was failing. She could barely feel her feet anymore. The shivering had progressed to something worse, a kind of stillness that terrified her. I said, "Get inside." The man moved closer, and she could see his face more clearly now. Hard angles, a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. And those eyes, gray like steel, like storm clouds, like nothing she'd ever seen before. "I don't know you," Irene managed through chattering teeth. "No," he agreed. "But you're dying, and I'm offering you a chance not to. Your choice. Make it fast. I don't have all night." Something in his tone, the brutal honesty of it, cut through her fear. He wasn't pretending to be kind. He wasn't offering false comfort. He was simply stating facts, and somehow that felt more trustworthy than any gentle lie would have. Irene tried to stand, but her legs gave out. Before she hit the ground, he caught her, lifting her into his arms with an ease that suggested she weighed nothing at all. His body was warm, impossibly warm, and she couldn't stop herself from pressing closer to that heat. Survival instinct overrode everything else. The car was luxury incarnate. Leather seats, heated, a partition between the front and back. He set her down carefully and draped a blanket over her shoulders. It was cashmere, heavy and soft and warm. The driver pulled away without being told, and Irene realized this man's employees knew his mind without needing instructions. "What's your name?" the man asked, settling into the seat across from her. "Irene," she whispered. Her eyes were already closing, exhaustion and cold pulling her under. "Stay awake, Irene." His hand touched her face, gentle but firm. "Look at me. Keep your eyes open." She forced them open, focusing on his face. "Who are you? My name is Alistair McCain, and you just became my responsibility whether either of us likes it or not." She woke in a bed that felt like sleeping on clouds. For a moment, Irene thought she'd died after all, that this was some kind of afterlife. Then pain registered. The ache of muscles pushed past their limits, the burning sensation in her fingers and toes as circulation returned. She was in a massive bedroom. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed a city view that had to be at least 30 stories up. The furniture was minimalist but expensive, all clean lines and dark wood. And she was wearing pajamas she didn't recognize, soft silk against her skin. The door opened and Alistair McCain walked in carrying a tray. He'd changed into dark slacks and a gray sweater that matched his eyes. The casual clothing somehow made him look more dangerous, not less, like a predator pretending to be domesticated. "You're awake," he said, setting the tray on the bedside table. "My doctor checked you over last night. You had stage 2 hypothermia. Another hour out there, and you would have been past saving." Irene pushed herself up slowly. "Where am I?" "My penthouse. Downtown." "You've been unconscious for 14 hours. She looked down at herself, at the unfamiliar clothes. "Who changed me?" "My housekeeper, Mrs. Shaw. She's been with me for years." "You were safe, Irene. Whatever else I am, I don't take advantage of unconscious women." There was something in his tone, an offense at the implication, that made her believe him. "I need to leave," Irene said, though she had no idea where she would go. "You need to eat," Alistair corrected, moving the tray closer. "And then you need to rest. After that, we'll talk about what comes next." Irene looked at the food. Real food. Soup that smelled like heaven, fresh bread, fruit. Her stomach growled so loudly it echoed in the quiet room. Alistair's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Eat." She did, trying to maintain some dignity but failing as hunger took over. She devoured everything on the tray while Alistair watched from a chair by the window. When she finally finished, shame crept in. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For being so pathetic. For you having to rescue me like some stray dog off the street." Alistair was quiet for a long moment, his gaze steady on her face. "I grew up in foster care," he said finally. 12 different homes before I aged out at 18. I know what it's like to have nothing. I know what it's like to be invisible, to be disposable. So don't apologize to me for surviving the only way you could." Irene felt tears prick her eyes. "Who are you, really? You're not just some businessman who drives around rescuing homeless people." "No," he agreed. "I'm not." Alistair stood and walked to the window, hands in his pockets, looking out at the city below. "I run things in this city. The things that happen in the shadows. The things people need but don't want to acknowledge. I'm what you might call a businessman of flexible morality." "You're a criminal," Irene said, and it wasn't a question. "I prefer entrepreneur in unrestricted markets. But yes, if you want the simple version, I'm what people call a crime boss." Irene should have been terrified, should have demanded to leave immediately. But something about his honesty, the way he didn't try to dress it up or make excuses, made her stay still. "Why did you help me?" He turned to look at her, and for a moment she saw something vulnerable flash across his face before his mask slid back into place. "Because I could," he said. "Because I was driving home from a meeting and I saw you there, dying slowly, and something in me couldn't just drive past. Because maybe I'm tired of only destroying things. Maybe I wanted to save something for once." The admission seemed to cost him. He looked away, jaw tight. "You can stay here until you're back on your feet. No strings attached. Mrs. Shaw will make sure you have everything you need. When you're ready to leave, I'll make sure you have enough money to start over somewhere safe." Irene stared at him, this dangerous man offering her kindness with no apparent expectation of return. It didn't make sense. Nothing about this made sense. "What if I don't want to leave?" Alistair's head snapped around, his eyes sharp on her face. What did you say? Irene wasn't sure where the words had come from, but now that they were out, she didn't take them back. I said, what if I don't want to leave? You saved my life. Maybe I could work for you. Earn my keep. I'm not a charity case. You don't know what you're saying, Alistair said, his voice hard. This world I live in, it's not safe. People I associate with, they're not good people. You'd be better off anywhere else. Maybe, Irene said. But anywhere else I'm alone. I have nothing. No family, no friends, no one who would notice if I disappeared tomorrow. At least here. She gestured around the room. At least here I exist. At least you see me. Something in Alistair's expression cracked. He crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping close enough that Irene had to tilt her head back to look at him. You don't know me, he said, but his voice had gone soft. You don't know the things I've done, the people I've hurt. I'm not a good man, Irene. I'm not even a decent one. Then why does it feel like you're trying so hard to convince me to leave? Irene asked. If you were really as terrible as you claim, wouldn't you just take what you wanted and not care what I thought? Alistair stared at her for a long moment, something like wonder crossing his face. You're either very brave or very foolish. Maybe both, Irene admitted. But I haven't had anything to be brave about in a long time. Maybe I want to see what it feels like again. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His touch was gentle, reverent even. If you stay, he said quietly, things will change. For both of us. I can feel it. Is that a warning or a promise? Both. Irene took a breath, making a choice that would alter the course of her entire life. Then I'm staying. 3 weeks passed like a dream Irene was afraid to wake from. She learned the rhythms of Alistair's world. He left early most mornings, returning late, sometimes with blood on his knuckles that he'd wash away before saying goodnight. She learned that Mrs. Shaw had been Alistair's first foster mother, the only one who'd been kind, who'd retired and come to work for him when he'd made his fortune through less than legal means. She learned that Alistair collected first edition books, that he spoke 3 languages, that he had nightmares he never discussed. And she learned that the criminal empire he ran was vast and complex. Shipping, real estate, information brokering. He dealt in power and influence, in favors owed and debts collected. Irene started helping Mrs. Shaw with household management. Then she started noticing patterns in Alistair's business, inefficiencies in his scheduling, contacts who weren't being utilized properly. One night she left a note on his desk with suggestions. The next morning, Alistair found her in the library. Did you write this? He asked, holding up her note. Irene's heart hammered. Yes. I'm sorry if I overstepped. I just noticed that if you moved your meeting with the Port Authority contact to before your dinner with the councilman, you could leverage one for the other. And Alistair sat down heavily, staring at her. You understand what I do. I understand power, Irene said. I understand negotiation. I had a job once, before the fire. I was a paralegal. I spent my days watching people broker deals, leverage information, play chess with people's lives and livelihoods. Your world isn't that different. It's just more honest about what it is. Alistair was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, a real smile that transformed his entire face. You're brilliant. I'm useful, Irene corrected. There's a difference. No, Alistair said, standing and moving toward her. You're brilliant, and I've been a fool not to see it sooner. He stopped close, too close. Irene could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive. I have a problem, he said. Irene's breath caught. What kind of problem? There's a man, Alistair said, his voice tight with controlled anger. His name is Marcus Webb. He runs the East Side, Thinks he's going to expand into my territory. He's been making moves, quiet ones, buying loyalty from some of my lower-level operators. I need to know his next play before he makes it. Irene's mind was already working. You need someone on the inside, someone he wouldn't suspect. Someone like me, Irene said. Alistair's jaw clenched. No, absolutely not. It's too dangerous. You asked me to stay, Irene reminded him. You said things would change. Did you mean it or not? I meant I'd protect you, not put you in danger. Maybe they're the same thing, Irene said. Maybe the only way to really protect me is to let me be part of your world instead of just living in it. You could die, Alistair said bluntly. Webb doesn't play games. If he suspects you're working for me, he'll kill you without hesitation. Then I won't get caught, Irene said with more confidence than she felt. Tell me what you need. Alistair studied her for a long moment, conflict clear on his face. Then he made a decision she could see cost him. There's a charity gala next week. Webb will be there, looking for connections, for people to corrupt. I need you to approach him. Make him think you're unhappy working for me, that you have information to sell. Irene nodded slowly. And then? Then you feed him exactly what I tell you. Enough truth to make him trust you. Enough lies to lead him into a trap. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt alive for the first time since the fire. When do we start? Now, Alistair said. But first, you need to understand something. He stepped even closer, his hand coming up to cup her face. If anything happens to you, if Webb touches one hair on your head, I will burn his entire operation to the ground. I will make him beg for death. Do you understand? Irene's heart raced, but not from fear. I understand. Promise me you'll be careful. I promise. Alistair's thumb brushed across her cheek, and the tenderness of the gesture contrasted so sharply with the violence in his words that Irene felt something crack open inside her chest. The gala was everything Irene had expected. Champagne, designer gowns, people dripping in wealth while pretending to care about whichever cause was being celebrated this week. Alistair had bought her a dress, deep emerald silk that clung to her curves and made her feel like someone else entirely. Someone powerful. Someone dangerous. He'd barely been able to look at her without something hungry flashing in his eyes. But they'd arrived separately, playing their parts. Irene circulated through the room, hyper-aware of every glance, every whisper. Then she saw him. Marcus Webb was handsome in a cold way, blonde hair, blue eyes, expensive smile that never reached his gaze. He held court near the bar, surrounded by admirers and sycophants. Irene took a breath and made her approach. Mr. Webb, she said, making her voice uncertain, nervous. He turned, assessing her with a glance that felt invasive. Yes, I work for Alistair McCain. The words hung in the air. Webb's expression didn't change, but she saw the calculation in his eyes, the sudden interest. Is that so? And what brings one of McCain's employees to speak with me? Irene glanced around nervously, playing the part. I shouldn't be talking to you. If he finds out, if Alistair knew I was here, that I was speaking to you. Then why are you? Webb asked, leaning closer. Because I'm tired of being invisible, Irene said, letting real emotion bleed into her voice. I'm tired of watching him make decisions I could make better. I'm tired of being underestimated. Webb's smile grew. McCain has always been foolish about who he trusts. What kind of information are we talking about? Irene leaned in, lowering her voice. He's planning to move a shipment through the harbor next week. High-value merchandise. If someone were to intercept it, they could cripple his cash flow for months. Webb studied her face. And what do you want in return? Recognition, Irene said simply. A position in an organization that values intelligence over loyalty. He pulled out a business card, pressing it into her hand. Call me tomorrow. We'll discuss terms. As he walked away, Irene felt Alistair's gaze on her from across the room. She didn't look at him, didn't acknowledge him. But she felt the weight of his attention like a physical touch. The next 2 weeks were a carefully choreographed dance. Irene fed Webb information, each piece carefully crafted by Alistair to seem valuable while actually being worthless. She met with Webb in coffee shops, in parking garages, always careful, always watching for tails. And slowly, Webb began to trust her. He told her about his operation, about his plans to expand, about the weaknesses he perceived in Alistair's empire. Irene reported everything back, and Alistair listened with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "You're good at this," he said one night after she'd returned from a meeting with Webb. "Too good. It scares me." Irene looked up from the notes she was making. "Why?" "Because I'm watching you become someone who lives in shadows, who lies without flinching, who plays with people's lives like chess pieces. And I'm the one who put you there." "I was dying in the rain when you found me," Irene reminded him. "You gave me a reason to live. This, what we're doing, it makes me feel alive." "But at what cost?" Alistair asked. "What are you losing to gain this?" Irene set down her pen and crossed to where he stood by the window. She'd learned his tells over these weeks, the way he stood when he was conflicted, the tension in his shoulders when he was afraid. "I'm not losing anything," she said softly. "I'm finding something I didn't know I was missing." Alistair turned to face her, and the look in his eyes stole her breath. "You're making this harder," he said roughly. "Making what harder?" He reached out, his fingers tangling in her hair, pulling her close. "This, trying to keep my distance. Trying not to want you so badly it consumes every other thought." Irene's heart hammered against her ribs. "Then stop trying." His control snapped. He kissed her like he was drowning and she was air, desperate and demanding and tender all at once. Irene melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, kissing him back with all the emotion she'd been holding inside. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Alistair rested his forehead against hers. "This is dangerous," he whispered. "More dangerous than Webb, than any of this." "I don't care," Irene said. "I love you, Alistair. I've loved you since that first night when you could have driven past but didn't." Alistair's breath caught. "Say that again." "I love you," Irene repeated, stronger this time. "I love your darkness and your light. I love your violence and your gentleness. I love who you are, all of it, even the parts you think make you unlovable." Alistair pulled back just far enough to look into her eyes, and what she saw there made her chest ache. "No one has ever said that to me," he said, his voice raw. "No one has ever meant it." "I mean it," Irene whispered. "Every word." He kissed her again, slower this time, pouring everything he couldn't say into the touch. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "I love you, Irene. God help me. I've loved you from the moment I saw you fighting to survive in that storm. You were so fierce, so determined not to give up, and something in me recognized something in you, like calling to like." Irene smiled through the tears streaming down her face. "What do we do now?" "Now," Alistair said, a harder edge entering his voice. "We finish this. Webb made his move tomorrow night. He thinks he's walking into an ambush for me, but really, he's walking into a trap. And when it's over, when he's dealt with, I'm getting out." "What?" Irene pulled back in shock. "The Empire. This life. I'm done. I've been making arrangements for weeks. Legitimate businesses to transition into, people who can take over my operations, exit strategies. I want out, Irene. I want a life where I don't have to watch my back every second, where I don't have to worry about you getting caught in the crossfire. I want normal. With you." Irene's mind reeled. You're serious. Deadly serious. I've spent my whole life building power because I never wanted to be helpless again. But power without someone to share it with, power that keeps you isolated and afraid, that's just another kind of prison. You set me free, Irene. Now let me be free with you. She threw her arms around him, holding tight. Yes, she said against his chest. Yes to all of it. Alistair held her close, and for a moment, they were just two people who'd found each other in the darkness, holding on against the storm. But the storm wasn't over yet. The next night, Irene met Webb at a warehouse near the docks. He'd brought 6 men with him, all armed, all watching her with predatory eyes. You have the information? Webb asked without preamble. Irene pulled out a folder, her hands steady despite her racing heart. Everything you need. McCain's shipment routes, his security details, the exact time and location of the transfer. Webb flipped through the pages, greed lighting his eyes. This is perfect. With this, I can take everything from him. You've done well, Irene. He pulled out an envelope fat with cash. Your payment, as promised. Irene took it, forcing herself to smile. And my position in your organization? Webb's smile turned cold. About that? He nodded to his men, and suddenly Irene was surrounded, guns pointed at her head. You didn't really think I'd trust someone who betrayed their employer, did you? Webb said almost kindly. You're a valuable asset, Irene, but also a liability. Can't have you running to McCain when things get difficult. Don't worry. Your death will be quick. Irene's mind raced. Alistair had prepared her for this possibility. She just had to stay alive long enough. Before anyone could pull a trigger, the warehouse exploded with sound and light. Doors burst open from every direction. Alistair's men poured in, armed and armored, moving with military precision. And then Alistair himself appeared, walking through the chaos like an avenging angel. He was dressed all in black, a gun in his hand, his face a mask of cold fury. Hello, Marcus, he said pleasantly. I believe you have something of mine. Webb grabbed Irene, pressing a gun to her head. Stay back, or she dies. Alistair didn't even slow down. You're not going to shoot her. How do you know? Because if you do, I'll spend the rest of your very short life making you regret it. And more importantly, because you're not stupid enough to waste your only leverage. Alistair was right. Webb's hand trembled, indecision flickering across his face. It was all the opening Irene needed. She drove her elbow back into Webb's ribs, exactly like Alistair had taught her. The gun went flying. Alistair was on him in seconds, and what happened next was brutal and efficient. Within minutes, Webb was on his knees, his men disarmed and restrained, his empire crumbling around him. Alistair pressed his gun against Webb's temple. Give me one reason not to end this right now. Irene stepped forward, her voice calm. Because you're not that person anymore. Because we're getting out, remember? We don't need his death. We just need him gone. Alistair's jaw clenched, conflict clear on his face. Then slowly he lowered the gun. You're right, he said. He looked down at Webb with contempt. You have 24 hours to disappear. Leave the city. Leave the state. Leave the country for all I care. But if I ever see you again, if I ever hear you're operating anywhere near my territory, what I do to you will make tonight look like mercy. Understand? Webb nodded frantically. Good, Alistair said. He turned to his men. Make sure he gets the message. As Webb was dragged away, Alistair turned to Irene, and the mask fell away. He crossed to her in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms. Are you hurt? Did he touch you? I'm fine, Irene said, holding him tight. I'm okay. I thought I'd lose you, Alistair said roughly. When I saw him with that gun to your head, I thought my heart would stop. But you saved me, Irene reminded him. Again. This time you saved yourself, Alistair corrected. You were brilliant and brave and terrifying, and I've never loved you more. He kissed her there in the warehouse, surrounded by his men and the wreckage of his old life, kissing her like she was the only solid thing in a shifting world. When they finally broke apart, Irene smiled up at him. So, she said, about that normal life you mentioned, what did you have in mind? Alistair laughed, the sound lighter than she'd ever heard from him. I'm thinking somewhere quiet, maybe a small town where nobody knows our names. I'll run my legitimate businesses remotely. You can do whatever you want, be whatever you want. We'll have a garden, maybe a dog. Sounds boring, Irene teased. Sounds perfect, Alistair corrected. Sounds like home. 6 months later, the garden was real. They'd bought a house in a small coastal town, far from the city, far from the life they'd left behind. It was modest by Alistair's old standards, but it had a porch and a yard and windows that let in light. Irene planted roses, white ones that climbed up trellises and burst from carefully tended beds. She'd started taking online classes, thinking about law school, about using her skills to help people instead of manipulate them. Alistair ran his businesses from a home office, legitimate investments and real estate that generated income without the constant threat of violence. He'd made arrangements with his successors, handed over his empire in pieces to trusted lieutenants who understood the rules. And slowly, gradually, they'd built something neither of them had ever expected to have: a normal life. Irene found Alistair in the garden one evening, sitting on the bench they'd installed beneath an oak tree, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. She settled beside him and he pulled her close, his arm around her shoulders. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "How different this is," Alistair said. "How quiet. I spent 20 years surrounded by noise, by chaos, by constant threats and power plays. And now it's just this. Just us. Is it enough?" Irene asked softly. Alistair turned to look at her, and his eyes were clear, peaceful in a way she'd never seen before. "It's everything," he said. "You're everything." Irene leaned into him, watching the sun sink below the horizon. They'd both been lost once, broken by the world, convinced they'd never be anything but damaged. But somehow they'd found each other. Somehow, in the wreckage of two shattered lives, they'd built something whole. A dog barked in the distance, wind rustled through the roses carrying their perfume on the evening air. And two people who'd started as strangers in a storm sat together in the gathering twilight, finally at peace. What do you do when the most feared man in the city offers you shelter? You take it. You take the risk. You let yourself be saved. And maybe, just maybe, you save him right back.